Hello, everybody. This is Mary Hollywood, and today on At the Crossroads, we have two super special guests. It's a father and daughter duo, Michael and Larkin, and we want to discuss, I think right now, our country is in a huge divide between the youth and the older generations. I feel like the youth has so much fire and passion, but at the same time right now, there's a huge feeling of hopelessness that is overtaking them. And we want to see, how we can move forward and kind of bridge this divide. So you guys are working on a project called Amplifire Project that we want to discuss. So Larkin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go ahead and have your father, Michael, talk.
Okay, hi. My name is Larkin Harrington, and I'm currently working as a veterinary assistant / veterinary technician. My history, however, is in primatology. Studied with chimpanzees in college.
Cool.
Yeah, and love working with animals. It's my life dream and what really invigorates me. However, I also, I come by it naturally from my father, but I really am an activist at heart. And especially over the past 10 years of my life, I feel like things have really been amplifying, if you will. And it has given me more and more of a desire to become active and get my voice out there, but mostly use my voice constructively for people who are not being listened to or cannot get their voice heard as easily as mine as a young white woman. Mm-hmm. And I really, really feel connected to this movement just because of the apathy I have felt as a young person. It comes in waves of wanting to fight as hard as you can and also facing this wall of this obstruction. Yeah. And what I want to be able to bring to my community, especially young people, is the ability to, because I almost feel like I'm past that bridge of being a young person who's invigorated and ready and, angry all the time and full of this rage and ability to continue. I've almost gone that plateau of feeling useless and hopeless and powerless completely. So now in my following projects like this and my father, I would like to work that voice for young people.
Awesome. That's exactly what we need. So Michael, please introduce yourself and tell us how we are going to make this happen with your experience.
If I could put that in a can, I would be able to retire to Tahiti. If I had that answer. My name is Michael Harrington, and I've been working with young people since 1970 almost, so it's about 50 years. And one thing has never changed in the past 50 years as far as adults and what falls under the big category of youth is a disconnection, mostly because when we become adults, we forget that we were not listened to, and how bad that lack of communication messed with our lives and made us into parts of who we are that we would have been able to do so much better had we been listened to. What I find right now, and the reason that the Amplifier Project is so vital and things like it are so vital is, and I don't want to get ahead of myself by saying there's not that many things like it, that it's not just in 2020 that people 22 years and younger are disconnected from adults. It's that they are the only experts that we have. And most of them don't know that.
Yeah.
Most of them don't believe that. My daughters know that because that's the way they were raised.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been able to bring many peers and friends to the realization that they are experts. But the problem with being an expert and having all that responsibility of an expert is that you don't have the authority. It leaves you powerless and voiceless and frustrated. So the idea has always been, in this past half century, to find like-minded adults who are willing to give their wisdom without cost,
Mm-hmm.
and to discover ways to bring these experts to the table and cause their voices to be heard. And by meaning caused, you have to push a cause. I mean, you don't just say, listen to these people. You got to knock down doors. And then being willing to do that. And then the hard work, after realizing that from a place of humility, that it's not your voice that needs to be heard, but that your voice needs to lift up and amplify, is to resource these voices. And most of the time when Americans hear the word resource, especially gentrified Americans, when they hear the word resource, they go, "Oh, somebody wants my money."
Money.
And I love taking people's money. Don't get me wrong, because being a minister, you're always passing the plate. But it's the resource of ourselves, it's the resource of who we know, and it's the resource of being out front, and it's the resource of finding money. But it's not that money can't be found. Money can always be found.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complete fallacy that money is scarce. That's not what's scarce. What's scarce is courage.
Absolutely.
What's scarce is whatever the opposite of greed is. And fortunately, my daughters and their friends have had multiple experiences with the other, and with Anglo-American, westernized, colonizers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's rare. And it causes them to have two choices. They're either going to lead with that knowledge, or they're going to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the two choices that you and I are left with. We're either going to lead, or we're going to be miserable. Now, we can try to cover that up, and we do a good job of it. Right now, our country is, and all of the Western countries, and it's really important to note, it's the westernized countries, the colonizers, who are the ones that are looking for ways to escape, even if it means killing yourself or somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other part of this Amplify project.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's so important, the way that you put the youth as the expert in this situation, because I think that what lacks the most between the two generations, like there's so many generations, right? XYZ, you don't even know who's who, but the boomers, right, against Gen Z. But it's really that what I found is that lack of respect, like, because the people who vote are generally, they're going to be in that boomer category. In the end, they're like, these kids, they want all these changes, but they don't do anything, right? They're just shouting from the rooftops. But in the end, it becomes like what you're saying, if you're not taken into consideration and valued for what you do bring to the table, then you're just putting an edge between this, where we have to say, listen, like, we've been there, we've done that. We have to remind ourselves, like you said, of us when we were young.
Well, it's like, when, if you don't do the things that we're talking about, then don't be surprised when the opposite is at your doorstep. And you're right about the voting part, but I learned from that. What I learned from that is that we are trying to, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm not any of those things, and I have my own reasons why I vote. But one thing's for sure, I don't want for a minute for any young person who they're the ones that are going to bear the brunt of whatever my generation of boomers and even those older than I am and people your age are going to saddle them with, because we've said, you've got to beat this guy.
Yeah.
Well, see, what do I know? Do we have to beat this guy? Is that the problem? Is this guy the problem?
Mm-hmm.
This guy's not the problem.
Yeah.
You know?
I would love to hear from Larkin.
I would love to hear from Larkin too, because she's being very polite right now.
Yes.
Stop being polite, Larkin.
Larkin, now it's like your dad was saying, we basically have been given, two options that are each awful in its own way. And it's like the youth are being completely ignored and shunned from this equation. How do you feel, like, how do you see this going forward? Speaking as the youth.
Well, as soon as you said, I'm glad you brought up the issue of respect, because, oh, hi, little one.
Say hi. He's shutting off the audio. 1 second.
The issue of respect coming our way as a lack of respect. You hear the conversations, especially online, between the boomer generation, Gen Z, Gen X, whatever you want to call it, 20 younger. And one of the patterns I recognize is these older generations saying, it's almost that tit for tat thing. Like, well, you don't have any respect yourself, and what would you know? And I think it's that very traditional sense. Well, it's your elders who know. It's, defer to your parents, defer to your grandparents, defer to the powers that be. And they say, well, you're not respecting us, and you don't respect civility, and what do you know? And it's almost like, well, where can we find that respect for you?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to show me that's going to instill respect? Many parents of people I know that are my age have zero respect for their children. Almost every adult outside of my family that I know has a hard time having a conversation with a younger person, because they will immediately write them off as either ignorant or, you have no experience. You like, what could you possibly know? And the truth from what I'm seeing is that, as my dad said, we are the experts right now. We know and see more accurately what is occurring. And that, your question hurts me very deeply, because it's the question I wake up asking every morning, is how do you reconnect these generational gaps through respect and dialogue? And my main thought there is young people like myself having this exact conversation. And so feeling less, somehow having adults like my father and you speaking to us as though we do have value and we do have knowledge and we are the experts here. And the more that dialogue happens and the more that people my age are seeing, oh, wow, like, look at the way that he just had that conversation with her. I think that can be hopefully at least one of the gateway moments in my, other than just full on angry revolution.
Yeah. I think that now something that I think that the older generation doesn't understand, they love to criticize social media.
Right.
But to me, social media has been the most liberating and democratizing force that there has ever been, I think, in our world right now with the internet. As awful as it can get, that's only a reflection of that person that is exteriorizing themselves through it. But
For sure.
the fact that now this is the informational age, so we have access to everything almost, right? Anything. Like, there's no room for lies anymore. And I feel that all the lies that our country have been founded upon over and over again is crumbling. And it's very hard that when you lived so many decades under certain propaganda and, MSM, all these narratives that we are the best, we're number one, you know what I mean? Like, we're the powerhouse. I think it's crushing to them, and to have a youth that you think is lesser than say, listen, things are not the way that you think it is. We have to change. I think it hurts them, and they don't know how to navigate that. So they just kind of like put it to the side.
Or,
what do you think?
Are aggressive about it.
Yes. It's so interesting that you said that, because they say that, the youth are uncivilized, but man, these people can get really rude online as well.
Really rude.
What do you think about this, Michael?
The internet is the printing press.
Mm-hmm.
It's before the World Wide Web and after the World Wide Web. It's the same thing as before the printing press and after the printing press. There was two different worlds, and it ushered in the Renaissance. It ushered in reason. It ushered in enlightenment. It ushered in, unfortunately, colonization. So anytime you have something miraculous and marvelous and remarkable and life-changing, you're also going to have people that are going to try to monetize it. Mm-hmm. and have power over it. It's my belief, and what I view is that it's the people that have problems with navigating social media are people over the age of 40, or 50. They don't understand the medium. They don't understand what is going on between preteens and the media. They don't understand the wisdom that they possess in navigating and having their own narratives. And because of their ability and because they were born with that tool in their hand, mm-hmm. We don't have a place of judgment that you can even it's like standing on ice. We have no standing. We should just keep our mouths shut.
It's like you said, Daddy, that I tried to explain several different platforms to you, social media platforms, and to me, it's, as a anthropological linguist, I'm like, it is a language. It's a language that we can't explain to the older generation, because it just doesn't. It would be like explaining syntax to someone who's Japanese and trying to speak English and explain that as just an inherent understanding that you have. Me trying to explain it to you, it was as if I was thinking, well, that's just the way it is. You know, it's
Yeah.
hard to explain as it's something we've grown into. It's our own language and our own community.
Yeah.
And
It's so intuitive.
yes,
Or yeah, it's natural. It's already embedded in your brain. You were born with it.
right.
You know, and like your is that your son?
Yes.
Your son, you know, by the time he's 10, is going to have at his fingertips more knowledge than, or the ability to access more knowledge than I have in my entire life. And I'm an academic, and you know, I'm surrounded right now with 60 research books that I'm using for Amplifier, and that's going to be nothing.
Yeah.
But the only way it's going to work, and the reason that the Amplifier Project to me is so vital, is that it's going to take old gentlemen like me to be willing to be patient and to pass this on and say, you know, this particular book is vital piece of information that you need to know, not because it was a great book or anything else. What you need to know is you need to know the history so that it won't be repeated, so that you can build upon it, so that you know the shoulders that you're standing on. And that's what is missing in the civil discourse between elders and experts. And that's what I prefer to call, like Larkin has heard me say for her entire life, I call the people that I work with students. I don't call them youth. I don't call them kids, except when maybe I'm just being a jerk. But they're, to me, we're all students. And the students that have been born since 1995 to now, those students have the natural ability to lead us out of this. What they don't have is they don't have a place at the table, and they don't have advocates, and they don't have resources.
So speaking of resources, let's get into it. I want you to tell me what the Amplifier Project is.
What the Amplifier Project is it's like you come to that place in the woods where there's a campfire. And sitting around that campfire are elders and young people, and there's food and drink and quiet conversation. And then somebody stands, doesn't matter who it is, and begins to tell their story. And as they tell their story, the rest of the group around the campfire is completely engrossed in the story. And that story, that narrative seeps into them and becomes part of who they are. And it never leaves them from that moment on. Because that group has become a community and their story is vital. So the Amplifier Project is a place to come and gather, even for a moment, and listen to the stories. And let that narrative become a part of you. And so it inspires you to knock down walls to make that story heard. And for the elder, it means that your story can be heard by new ears instead of just spitting it out into the universe in anger or frustration or depression. And for the student, it means that you have a new ally because you can relate to that story, and in relating to that story, you can add your narrative, and then it goes on and on and on. Now, that's a nice dream, right? That's a big ask, but it's no different than saying there's children at our border who are incarcerated and dying spiritually and physically and emotionally. And all it takes is getting up out of your seat and going to the border. But how hard is that? So what makes it possible is that I call my friend I'm in Seattle, and I call my friend that I'm connected to through the internet in San Antonio. And I find a way that we can get somebody to the border. And that my job is to make that known in the wider world, to get them resources to be able to do that. And then Larkin's job is to find other people her age who will gather there and say no more. And that's just a simple thing. But it can't be done without a community. And so what I found is I'm in connection with at least 5,000 theologians and academics and practitioners that I have accumulated over the past 5 years that are desperate to do exactly what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. But they have within their church denominations or within their universities or within their businesses or nonprofits, they have no focus, they have no time, they have to fundraise. So what Amplifier wants to do is to bring them all to the table and say, listen to Larkin. She has an idea. Mm-hmm. And then it's my job and your job to become the fire under that elder that they are going to follow up. Mm-hmm. And that's the one of the missing pieces. And then I'm gonna hush. Is that with all of these people that have good ideas and are doing the good, mm-hmm. and are righteously working hard, they're not holding hands. Yeah. And without us holding hands, Trump's just the beginning. Just the beginning. That's what Amplifier is.
I love it. That's definitely what's missing. We need to give the youth a platform with resources so that they can actually do the things that they want to do. As a young person, I think that the youth has so much more time than an adult does, or like as a mother does. They have that time to devote if they only had the resources to go out and do it. I love it. I definitely want to help in whatever way that I can. Larkin, where do you see the Amplifier Project going?
Well, as I said, my desperate answer to your question was that these are the conversations that need to happen. So if we can successfully manage to create a platform for young people and the older generation to get together and have an open and very respectful dialogue, that's really the only hope I can see for right now. So I can see this organization giving the resource to young people that want to do what I want to do, which is form rallies, fundraise for groups they want to support, write, perform, do the things that are going to be most successful through social media. Mm-hmm. I can see really, really big opportunity through just people, and this is what my dad has said and kind of been in my mind my whole life, is just listen.
Yeah.
Because the power of just listening, even for young people as well. I won't deny that for being ignored and pushed aside and told, what do you know, for your whole life. And I can be a very volatile person. That can cause a shutdown as well. So I'm not only calling for the boomers, like, you know, the okay boomer situation to be I'm calling for young people as well to really have the patience to listen, because I mean, my dad is an approachable older gentleman. Most are not, you know. So I hope that this provides a place for young people to learn that, and older people to learn that.
I think we all have to be more open-minded and understanding that we cannot do this alone. We need allies, and we need to form coalitions.
Absolutely.
And there are certain things that doesn't matter if you have differences of opinion, like everybody has the way that they think that we should approach it. But there are certain common things that we can all say, okay, we can all shelter under this home. And I think that's something really interesting. I was a huge Marianne Williamson supporter, and she was like, man, they stepped on her like it was nobody's business, right, in the primary. But now, and I always say, time is our friend. Time will always tell. Now they've seen, like, she is one of the few candidates that actually stood, you know, with her integrity intact, supporting the progressive movement. And all of, like, the Bernie supporters that bashed her in the beginning are coming around and saying, man, like, I'm sorry I didn't support you in the beginning. Like, now I see you really are an ally.
Right.
So, and I wanted to, because you mentioned, Michael, that you were a minister. And how do you feel in terms of, I feel like a lot of the youth are, I don't want to get into, like, you know, religion or not, but there's a huge movement of, like, a secular movement. And how can we also bridge this spirituality and activism, not even politics? Do you see a path forward for that?
I have my whole life seen a path forward from that, even though my whole life has been thwarted time and again by the magisterium of, if I can borrow that language, of the institutional church. And being an ordained person and all, going to seminary and all that, only taught me how incredibly wrong the institution has created itself over the years. And as any organized religion goes, no matter who it is or what it is it's a continuum of bullshit, because that's the only way that you can sell magic. You got to have an illusion, and religion's magic. You know, that doesn't mean that religious figures aren't real. You know, I believe that Dr. King was a religious figure, but I believe that Greta Thunberg is a religious figure. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure she doesn't go to church. I believe that Billie Eilish is prophetic, mm-hmm. you know, and but what that has to do that gives me hope for the dying denominational and Catholic Christian church is, and I separate that from any other brand of Christianity, because all other brands of Christianity have gone so far off the radar of human nature and just being a kind thing that I wouldn't categorize them as religions as much as I would categorize them as psychotic. And so the few brands of Christianity that I am associated with, and every one of these 5,000 people I talked about is related in a sense to that Western theology. And I'm a Western theologian. I didn't grow up, I grew up on a few Eastern religious things, but they were translated by white men. Mm-hmm. And Western thought is the word of a white man. That's all it is. And so that in itself has to change. And the way it'll change is when, and it's already happening, is when women, when African American voices, when indigenous voices, and for certain young voices do something about it. And it's so different than what Western Christianity is. And so the way I answer, what does the church have to do with it, is that we have reparations to make. And I'll end by saying this, that there's a denomination in Canada called the United Church of Canada. And I love them because last year, after they had, there's an old saying that when you have a unification of denominations, when your numbers decline. So the Methodists and the United Church of Christ came together in Canada and formed the United Church of Canada, and it's dying. And so they just came right out and said, we're dead. And I fell in love with them immediately, because that opens up the portal to, what do we do with all this stuff? Mm-hmm. We got all this stuff. There are trillions and trillions of dollars worth of stuff that need to be shared right now. And that's what I think the worth is. Plus, there's excellent philosophy that I showed you this book. This is called At the Heart of the White Rose. And the White Rose was a movement right before Hitler embarked on his interventions. These people, this girl is 15, and this young man is probably 17. And this was a movement of young Christians who lost their lives.
Yeah.
And I don't see them as any different than my daughter.
Yeah.
And my daughter's
they were shouting from the rooftops.
Yeah. My daughter is not a Christian, and it doesn't hurt my feelings. Mm-hmm. She's more Christian than any Christian I know.
Yeah.
And that's, Dad, to kind of follow what you said at the beginning, because I believe what Victoria was asking was, how can we bridge the gap of the death of the church and young people like myself who have a lot of, as you know, anger toward religious institutions. And we have that anger because, as you said, we don't see reparations for my queer brothers and sisters, for minorities, for Black people, for Latinx people. We see a lot of discrimination. We see a lot of hate. We see murder. We see total flippancy. And also people my age, honestly, correlate religion with MAGA hat wearing, gun toting white people who are going to attack you verbally, physically, and with extreme vitriol, and use God and Jesus and Trump Almighty as their, cross to bear. So what you said is what I think the answer is: reparations. If people start to see more, like, I don't have hate for the whole church. I have hate for the institution in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. But you and I have always had a good relationship because I see Christianity and religion and God through you as true,
actions.
Right, through true actions. And if people like me could see the young women you talk to who are down at the border trying to get health care for those children, if they see the work you're trying to do through Amplifire and through your work with people at the border, with Marianne Williams, I know that you worked for her and her voice. If people could see that side of religion and see that there was a movement of religious people saying, we need to put all this down on the table and ask for forgiveness. And also, we're going to be here. You can come stay in our church. We will protect you from these people with guns. Whenever I pass a church and I see them in Austin, I know Uncle Gary and Aunt Kathy go to a church like this that say, whomever you are welcome here and we will protect you. Because honestly, that's what I grew up thinking the church was for.
Yeah.
We'll protect you with our resources. the resources that should be given to people younger than me.
And our lives.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The elders need to realize that we need to lay down our lives.
Yes.
Because we're asking students to lay down theirs.
Every day.
And I don't value my life above my children's. Neither, you're a new mom.
Yeah.
You know what that means.
Absolutely. I think a lot has to do with trauma. I think that everybody that grew up around the time of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, they saw what happens if you stand up and you raise your voice. And I think that everybody internalized that and kind of went back into their little cocoon. But I think that now it's coming to a time that it's like, I've lived my life, look at the results. What do I have to lose? You know what I mean? Like, I have to leave this planet for my children. And in what shape am I going to do that? And man, we need to find some courage inside of us, because that's all that it's going to take. Some people that are going to be unafraid. And it's like civility is the tool of oppression, right? We know that.
Yeah.
But right now, what they're calling for civility is just hiding the truth. You know what I mean? We have to be honest and face some very, very hard truths that really, really hurts.
Yeah.
It's who we are. It's what we've allowed. And now, like Michael said before, it's no more. Like, it stops now.
Yeah. Civility is no longer sit down and it's listen to what I have to say and putting your body in front of these people. That's what I've told my dad. I said, it's time for my generation now to just, especially white people, we put our bodies in the way.
Yeah. I think now I just read a quote yesterday amid all these new deaths, right, through police brutality with Black men, and now Breonna Taylor. I don't know if you guys heard about it. There's no video of her shooting, but she was shot 8 times in her bed. And it's been 2 months, and there's been obviously no response from the authorities. And this woman, I forget her name, Jonna Riley, she said, the only question that I want to hear now from white people is, what are you doing to teach your children not to kill mine? And I was blown away when she said that, because it's like, we have to stop first with the white savior mentality that, we're going to come and save the day, and just be that change and say, listen, we messed up bad and it's time to pay reparations.
Yeah.
That's what the resources are. Before we get too far away from what is Amplify, what you're doing here is part of the vision, is to have podcasts and other platforms 24 hours a day. So my happy moment will be when I flip on Amplifier, I see one podcast after another podcast, after a YouTube, after this, I can punch on this button and go hear this person sing. I can punch on that button and I can hear this poetry being read. I can punch on this button and go and read, this essay. And I have this constant affirmation of students' voices being amplified by elders' voices, and no need for any editing or intervention. As you go out and do what you do, Mary, I would hope that you would invite people with these kind of platforms to let Amplifier know you're out there, and we'll invite you to be a part of it. This is an open invitation to every single person trying to get their voice heard in the midst of this opportunity, because we are at a portal that only comes around rarely.
Mhm.
And, I knew my whole life. I just knew, just like somebody asked me, how can you believe in God? And I don't have a clear answer other than I can't remember a single day of my life that I wasn't having a conversation with this thing called God,
Mhm.
even when I didn't want to have this conversation with this thing called God. And so I felt like what I was going to do, Mary, is just hold this thing's God's feet to the fire and say, prove it. And this thing proves it to me every day. This conversation we're having right here proves to me that somebody gives a damn.
Yeah.
And I always known that my daughter gave a damn, but now I know you, Mary, and I know that you give a damn. And my suspicion is that all the people that are working give a damn. And we just need to get all these people that give a damn together giving a damn. And so I would ask you to put the word out, to have them contact Amplifier through you. They can pick up a telephone and call me or Victoria. And I tell Larkin and all of her acquaintances, just walk around with a little piece of paper that's got the Amplifier information on it and hand it to them and say, turn this on between this and that and make your voice heard. We're never going to ask for money. If people want to give money to something, we'll plug them in.
Yep.
We're only what we want to do is give money. Somebody's going to come through you sometime, if I'm reading that thing there, Mary, and through Larkin, and they're going to have this message and this talent, and they're going to need us to push them to the next level. So
Absolutely. And that's exactly why I'm doing this. I saw this past year a lot of people fighting for principles and, fighting for the poor and for people of color. And yet no one actually empowered them. No one gave them that platform and let them make decisions and let them, do what they wanted to do. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this myself. And definitely my doors are wide open for anyone at Amplifier to come here and tell their story and just touch people to drive from that I say this every day now, from being anti-slavery to being an abolitionist, to being someone that's going to do something to change somebody's life and not just talk about it.
And again, to you and to Larkin and to anybody who's going to listen to this, you got a song, get in touch with us. You got a poem, get in touch with us. You want to break, your heart's breaking, come tell us your story. The narrative exists. It's just getting it out.
Yeah.
And I think this is more important than anything that I've seen in, I'm going to say 40 years.
Yeah. I think now what I'm so excited about this Amplifier project is that it's a way for us to continue the movement, even if, in politics, we have all those obstacles. I think the revolution is going to come from outside of politics.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be coming from us. We're going to drive that movement. So I am so super excited to, amplify this and tell everybody where we can find the website. It's amplifierproject.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
and if they can't find it that way, they can go straight to my Facebook page, which is Michael Harrington. I think it says Michael Omar. My middle name's Omar, O-M-A-R. So Michael Omar Harrington, Facebook. They can also go to the Amplifier Facebook page. There's going to be they're already starting today as an email newsletter. It went out to 500 people today, minimum, and they don't even know it exists. and now it's in their email. So it's going to, and it's
Start the network.
right. It's on Twitter. It's on
And
Instagram.
Larkin,
etc.
and where can we find you online?
Facebook is the best way. Twitter, I have yet to figure out.
All right, guys. So thank you so much for everything that
Mary,
you're
what a
doing.
pleasure.
You can count on.
Can't hear you.
Is it back?
It's back.
Okay. So you guys can count on us to amplify your Amplifier project. And
Great.
here's
We look
the
forward to
good
hearing
fight.
from you. Peace. Blessings.
So much. Say bye. Say bye, Ali.
Thank
Bye-bye, Ollie.
Thank you so much.
In Hollywood, everything is good.